Hi, this is Meredith Oliver with my co-host Chuck Gallagher.
And welcome back to Voices of Experience. Hi, this is Chuck Gallagher with Voices of Experience, and now I've got to say, this is my good friend Valda Ford. Valda and I go back to the Carolinas chapters, which is one of the most wonderful chapters in NSA. And I have to say, Valda, that I guess it was an interesting introduction whenever we first met, because here we are carrying on a conversation, and of course, what is the normal question people ask? What do you speak about?
Absolutely.
And you said?
Sex.
I was like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Somebody that talks about sex in NSA, there's got to be something for somebody.
Absolutely.
And you took it further, however. It was sex is not for sissies.
Yes.
Okay, so I know at this point in time, as a member of the board of NSA, you have probably the most unique topic of anybody that I've heard.
Seems to be.
Yeah, probably. So tell us a little bit, just for the sheer joy of it, a little bit about Sex is Not for Sissies. Where did that come from?
That came from a talk I used to give called Living, Laughing, and Loving. And when I would concentrate on that you should have love in your life, a woman came up to me and talked about being 74 years old, having a new beau in her life, and she was concerned because the things that he asked her about, she wondered if they were illegal, immoral, or unethical. And as I asked her more, I found that it was all pretty vanilla, but because of her generation, because of what she'd been taught, because she'd been married to the same man for 50 years before he died, she didn't know anything at all about sex. She really probably had never had much pleasure in sex, but even more importantly, she was very vulnerable to becoming infected with HIV or chlamydia or all of those things. Along with that, I had been asked by a county health department to help them have the conversations to get people to think differently about sex education in the schools. So those two things came together because, to me, a sissy is a person who is afraid, and that just stuck. So Sex is Not for Sissies means that you cannot be afraid if you're going to have safe sex safely and have satisfaction.
Valda, your background is?
I'm a registered nurse. I have 2 graduate degrees in education and public health.
For purposes of NSA members listening and maybe learning more about the board members, but as well as thinking about how does my career kick into gear, how did you go from nursing to speaking?
Well, that was one of those things that I had no intention of doing. I was...
What, nursing or speaking?
Well, I never wanted to be a nurse either, for that matter. I didn't want to do anything that women were supposed to do. I came up in a generation where women were supposed to be teachers, nurses, beauticians, and maybe secretaries. And that was what was limited. So I was always against being limited. However, when my second son was born and he had significant heart issues, ended up dying because of negligence and malpractice, it became my mission to understand what was going on and to try to be in a position to keep it from happening to me or others in the future. That's why I became a nurse.
Okay, so that's why you became a nurse. How did you become a speaker?
As a professor at Creighton University, I was tasked with going out and speaking to many people, especially those in vulnerable populations, because of my graduate degree in public health, looking at population-based strategies to help people get better. I ended up on just about every board and commission that had anything to do with vulnerability. So as I was speaking more and more and trying not to do research for tenure, I became recognized as an expert on vulnerability and cultural competency, and I've worked in over 50 countries around the world. After a year of doing that, people came to me and asked, "How much do you charge?" And I said, "Holy cow, you want to pay me money for doing what people have been trying to get me to stop doing all my life?" I thought that was the best of both worlds. I was talking because I wanted to get the message out, and someone wanted to pay me for it. And that's how I became a speaker.
There are a couple of different things that I really want us to talk about. You talk about diversity and vulnerability. What's the experience that you're finding, and is it possible, this is a two-pronged question, that the intolerance is raising the level of discussion to move us to a different place?
We always hope that we'll continue to move forward. And as an African American, Negro, colored woman, because I grew up through all of those things, to be black and proud, the whole thing about what's going on with race, with culture, with nationalism, with gender, with LGBTQ issues, there seems to be a backlash that people were starting to say, I've been suppressed all these years saying what I want to say, calling people what I want to call them, and having to be so politically correct that I'm just sick of it. And with certain things going on in our community, it became okay to say whatever you want, to do bad things, to be rude and crude. That came up. But because of that, we've had another switch to where the conversation is now there, where people used to say to me, well, we don't need to do anything about race and culture anymore because we've already done that. We have arrived. Well, some people might have arrived, but a lot of other people were still trying to get on the train. So now we have the opportunity to have the discussions again. And for those people who grew up in a, quote, integrated society, or let's say not specifically segregated society, because I don't believe that integration ever really happened. We just became desegregated in many instances. But because it has come up, and because there are now people who are willing to say, wow, I do see transgender men being abused automatically. I do see more evidence that there are bad things going on in the world of black men in law enforcement. I do see more women who are coming forward to say this has been going on all the time, i.e. the Me Too movement, where there are just people who are willing to speak up. And just like with every terrible thing that has happened that has served as the catalyst for change, or at least for conversation, we have that now. So there are more people who are willing to say, you know, I didn't know that. Or some people still saying that's not real, but those conversations continue. And we can no longer act like we were the only country in the world that had no racial, sexual, disability issues. Now we're back again to talking about these are very real issues, and we have not done all that we can. We've come a long way. And we've made a lot of good strides, but maybe we need to talk some more.
So what advice would you give to professional speakers to raise awareness of what we say, or the unconscious biases perhaps that you see that, because they're unconscious, we don't know about, but if you can talk about it, it takes it at least from subconscious to conscious. What are the things we need to be looking at?
I think that first and foremost, we should be paying attention to how people react to what we say. I have seen many people have a conversation with someone and watch that person flinch or stutter or have a nervous laugh because they don't know what to say, because they have been offended, or they're offended on behalf of the person beside them who is obviously squirming in their seat. But that one person is oblivious. So number one is pay attention. Just in general conversation, you should be paying attention to the cues that people give you. Mm-hmm. Are they leaning away from you? Are they trying to bid a hasty exit? There are some tools out there. There's one in particular called Project Implicit, and that is through Harvard University. There are a series of things you can do. It's just a one-finger test. So there's good, there's bad, there's black, there's white, there's fair, there's unfair. And then you might see a picture of a person of color. You might see someone who you may consider to be gay, or who is not from this country or has a different religion. And then just without thinking about it, you're supposed to press the button that you think goes with them: good, bad, pretty, ugly, etc. And at the end, they give you an assessment of what happened. If you try to game the test and slow it down and think about the answer that should be there, that's kicked out. So you can't game the test. And Harvard has been doing this for decades now, okay, as a part of a research study. So at the end, you might say, even for me, give you an example. There was a Project Implicit for Oprah Winfrey, as an example, and Martha Stewart. This was during a time when Martha might have done some things and ended up in some places that she didn't want to go.
Yeah, she lied and went to prison.
She lied and went to prison, right. So at that stage, here's my comparison of which one will come out on top for me. I'm just assuming it's going to be Oprah because she's the queen. who doesn't want to be a billionaire who came from nothing and all that good story. Nothing wrong with Martha, but I'm not much of a homemaker, so she wasn't blowing up my skirt, let's just say. In the end, I definitely leaned towards Martha. So the question was, why would I be leaning towards a woman who right now she's cool, but she's not that special? Well, it was the kind of bias that I had brought into myself because I've been told my entire life, you're not that special, you can't do that, you can't drink from this water fountain, you can't use this bathroom. Oh my goodness, you speak so well for a black woman. Oh my goodness, you're articulate, blah, blah, blah. All of those things that I'd heard over and over and over again, even by my parents. If you're going to be considered good, you have to be twice as good. All of those things had been brought into my subconscious as well. So I was biased towards all things white. If it's white, it must be right. That was deep in my subconscious. And even as a diversity educator at that point in time, I was like, whoa, what's going on here? But that's what I had been taught. So I didn't even recognize my own biases. You hear African American people talking about good hair or various things that are related to things we have nothing to do about. This is what we were born with. Why aren't we proud of it? But these are things that we were taught through society, through our own parents, through our schools, and we have to first recognize our own biases. And that's a great thing with Project Implicit, because there are tests there that look at race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, nationality, thin or fat, all of those things that we will not automatically recognize a bias because who has ever told us? Plus, we have a lot of yes people around us who do not challenge us when we say things that are inappropriate.
Let me just do a quick takeaway from this. If you Googled Project Implicit, you can take these tests.
Yes.
Is there a cost?
There's no cost.
Wow. So the test in various areas can help you identify if, in fact, you have a bias or what the bias is.
Exactly.
And at least like for you, it said, well, white is right, so I have that bias.
Yeah.
So therefore, at least you're aware of it, and then you can decide, oh, now how am I going to take action with that?
Exactly. And it can lead you to other things. You can continue to Google, or you can check with someone who's a diversity expert. If you recognize that you really have a bias against people who are over a certain age, you can start to look at the images that you see on television. The Dove commercials did the best possible thing with weight and a number of things because they were willing to put a woman who was the average size woman in America in a Dove commercial to show that as beauty.
Right.
Now, all of us who are a size 12, 14, or 16, which is right in the average for American women, were taught that beauty was a size 2, approximately age 14, because most of the models were between 14 and 19. So we were always denigrating ourselves by, oh my goodness, look at those wrinkles. Oh my goodness, I have gray hair. Oh my goodness, what about those laugh lines? Instead of just thinking, wow, I made it this far and let me celebrate every day.
How many followers do you have on Facebook or in social media?
On my Sex Is Not for Sissies Facebook page, I have approximately 500,000, a little over 500,000 followers on that one page.
Okay, I'm mind-boggled by that. Okay, I'm just going to tell you, I'm mind-boggled by that. Okay, so two parts to this.
Okay.
I think this would be really helpful for for folks that are in the speaking business and thinking, wow, there can be different models. First, most of the time, now if I'm off on this, just correct me. Okay,
sure.
Your Sex Is Not for Sissies programs are created programs. In other words, it's a program that you put on that is self-promoted.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So A, you're literally creating the audience.
Yes.
So how do you do that?
Fortunately and unfortunately, I had a really bad car accident and I was working on getting my memory back. I wanted to focus on something that was really something I knew, which was healthcare and sex education. And I knew I would not give bad information. I had to think about it. So while I was sitting there thinking about how will I do this, I only had 800 followers. I went to a publicity summit in the meantime and they said, we're not interested in you. You don't have a tribe. 800 people will not make a difference if you're on our radio show or you write in our magazine or come on our television show. You need to have at least 20,000 followers. So that was my goal, to get 20,000 followers. I took the time to sit down and start to post every day. Nothing was happening. I thought, what else do I need to do? So I started to talk to them the way I would talk to people in a workshop. If they would come back with a question like, well, why is it that there was just a time that I took this woman out to dinner and I wined and dined her, she had a good time, but when we got back home, she didn't want to have sex. And I would say, well, if you just wanted to have sex, why didn't you pay a prostitute? If it was just a transaction that you wanted and sex at the end, why go through all that? Just take the money and give it to someone who's going to definitely give you sex instead of having a crapshoot of this is what is what. And I said, well, why do you think that's okay? That's just a transaction. You're disrespecting her by expecting her to give you something she doesn't want to give you at the end of this transaction. That struck a nerve with people. And they would say, well, that's right, I believe that. What I had to do was find what was interesting to people to talk about and talk to them like real people, not like my clients, not like potential buyers, but just to have the auntie conversation. And when I've worked with people on their social media, I've gotten them to talk like they would talk to people in a workshop or a retreat. Have real questions, be very responsive, and be consistent, because consistency is what is needed. And that's easy to do as a speaker. You can pre-program, you can pre-schedule when your posts are going to come. So if you're on a plane flying to Dubuque and you have 3 connections, you can sit there and just post things that you want to. I make sure that at a certain time of day I'm on there because they expect me to be on there. Then I started doing Facebook Live. I started putting videos on there, and I would have miniature contests. For the best answer to this question, I will give you a free download. To the best answer, I might give you a free entry into an event. And it just took off, and they started to share. When I got to 1,000, the algorithm changed with Facebook. We know it changes every day now, so I can't tell you the best formula. But when I got to 1,000, it changed, and more people were getting on there. I started to do some ads. Then I got up to 20,000. From June to September, I went from 800 to 20,000. And by the end of a year, I was at 200,000. But when you're starting to get a following, the best thing that you can do is respond to every person. Just click like. You don't have to do anything else. The other thing is that I've learned if I ask them to follow me or to share, they do. If you're sitting there and waiting for them to share, they might if it's very provocative or very funny. But if you want them to share, simply say, this is great information. Make sure the people who want to know about ovulation and how to get pregnant, share it with your friends and with your cousins. And shares make a big difference with Facebook and with Google and whoever is doing the metrics. It makes a difference. So I paid some attention to what was required of me, but mostly I was there for them. I was 100% honest with them, and I tried to be 100% accurate with them.
It's an amazing story. And I know that there are going to be people that'll say, yeah, well, I don't have the time for that.
For me, I wanted to have the numbers, but I didn't think that I had the time. And actually, I found it doesn't take as much time. I mean, there aren't that many people who are doing the kind of thing that I'm doing with healthcare, where every answer has another 5 or 6 sub-levels.
You are a board member with NSA.
Yes.
What do you see for the future of this organization as we move toward 2020 and then beyond?
I believe that we have to look at what people do that is getting the spoken word to the audience and start paying attention to the many different ways it can happen. When I joined NSA, of course, Zig Ziglar and company were the models of what we needed to be. You need to be big and bold and audacious and basically get people to give you thousands of dollars by the time you finished with your presentation. Now there are folks who want tiny bites of information. They want micro lessons. They want them to happen in 2 to 5 minutes. They expect, though, that you should respond to them, not just a one and done. That's what I'm finding. So I'm able to build my business because I provide something now and tell them when I'll be there later and when I'll be there later again, and they should have me for multiple times in order to get the full thing. That's what we're looking at from the question of the board, not just a platform speaker, but also the consultant, also the person who does most of their business online, and the people who really know social media are going to be the ones who really survive, because faster, more edutainment is going to be the kind of thing that's going to get us going. And as a board, we really are looking to bring in new people and young people, because still our demographic is still a bit older than the people that we're trying to get to join us. So what is the benefit to a young person who can go on and really make some money quickly? It's for us to be more responsive, to pay attention, and to stay up to date.
If there was one thing that you would say to someone initially, I want to take my career to the next level, what would that be?
Too many people are afraid. They're looking for safe. They're looking for same. We heard the other day, same is lame. We don't need that anymore. So what is it that you do that's different, that's bold, that's amazing? And start at a small level. You don't have to have $50,000 to put on a major event. Put on something in your community center that's great, and then people will be your marketing force for you. Make it exciting, make it interesting, and make sure that you're giving the people what they want, not just what you want to deliver.
Valda, the one thing I will absolutely say, and everybody that knows you will say the same thing, you are anything but boring.
Well, thank you.
You rock. Thank you so much for being our guest here on VOE. It's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.